Good morning, good afternoon, evening, good night. Welcome to the Erin Molan Show. Wherever you are around the world, you are most welcome. It's great to have your company. We have a big show coming up. A lot happened over the weekend. Our guest, though, before I get stuck into those headlines, is Dr. Mike Kelly, an incredible human being, a former colonel in the Australian Army and a member of the Labor Party. So the Labor Party is the party that's currently in power in Australia under Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister. Now, Mike Kelly has an incredible understanding of the US, how they work. He's fought in wars alongside them militarily and strategically. He gives his take on Donald Trump. It's very interesting given he's from a party that is more traditionally to the left. But he is impressed, let me tell you that. He also talks about what needs to happen in Gaza. And it's interesting because General Petraeus told us about this kind of clear, secure, the method that they used in the Battle of Fallujah. Mike Kelly gives a similar kind of take, but there's differences. So fascinating to see what he thinks, having been involved in that battle and plenty of others as well. He's also spent 40 years studying the Middle East, so he has a great knowledge base and he's been there on the ground at the coalface. The other thing he's doing now at a university here in Australia is looking at the information warfare and studying that. This is the greatest information warfare battle in history, without doubt, and it is so sophisticated. The other thing that he points out, he uses a statistic, and that really backs up what Melanie Phillips, my guest last week, was saying about organisations like the UN and why these bodies that are supposed to be credible and respectable and stand for humanity, like the UN and the ICC, take your pick. He gave me a stat about the way the world is at the moment when it comes to dictatorships versus liberal democracies. It makes so much sense. He's amazing. So stay around for that. Now, let me get you across the headlines. And US President Donald Trump has torn into New York Judge Arthur Engoron, who had his $500 million penalty against the US President completely erased. This was on appeal. Now, a major legal victory for Donald Trump, one of his biggest since taking office. And there's a fair few to pick from. He's had his say. I don't need to tell you guys that he has not held back. He's gone onto Truth Social and he has called him crooked. This is the judge, Arthur Engoron, and corrupt. Crooked and corrupt. That word crooked's got a real run under Trump, hasn't it? Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has attempted to avoid answering, well, a very simple question. This was on an interview on the NBC. Have a listen to the host and Sergei's response or lack thereof.
Did Russia invade Ukraine, Mr. Foreign Minister? Did Russia invade Ukraine?
Russia started special military operation to defend the people whom Zelensky and his predecessor did not consider as humans. They called them beings, species. You should look. You should really. I understand that you need something to sell today, but if you are raising and touching upon so serious things, my suggestion is to take a look at the history of Ukrainian development after the coup in 2014.
But it's a yes or no question. It's a yes or no question, Mr. Foreign Minister. Do you acknowledge Russia invaded Ukraine?
I said to you that we started special military operation to protect the people whom the regime.
Now, he went on to say in this interview that Russia wants peace, apparently. Well, I mean, that could be easily gotten if they just stop attacking, but, you know, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. He's also said that he knows America wants peace, clearly through Trump, and he kind of reiterated that line that Putin respects Trump because he is acting in America's best interest and Trump respects Putin for the same reasons. But he says that given the reaction of European leaders after the Washington meeting, he says they don't want peace.
That's a big if. You're saying there's no meeting planned right now.
Kristin, I'm awfully sorry, you're not listening. There is no meeting planned, and I'm not challenging this. But you cannot, I think, understand what I am saying. Putin is ready to meet with Zelensky when the agenda would be ready for a summit. And this agenda is not ready at all. President Trump suggested, after Anchorage, several points which we share, and on some of them we agreed to show some flexibility.
Okay.
When President Trump brought those issues to the meeting in Washington, with Zelensky present together with his European sponsors, he clearly indicated, it was very clear to everybody that there are several principles which Washington believes must be accepted, including no NATO membership, including the discussion of territorial issues. And Zelensky said no to everything. He even said no to, as I said, to canceling legislation prohibiting the Russian language. How can we meet with a person who is pretending to be a leader?
Which is quite a strange and bizarre take. I'm sure the leaders of much of the free world had probably better things to do, but last minute jumped on a plane, went to Washington to meet with Trump and Zelensky. I think it shows that they absolutely want peace. Now, this Lavrov bloke he's bizarre. I remember when he walked out of, I think it was a United Nations meeting or something, when he was being condemned and people were talking about how horrific Russia's invasion of Ukraine was. And he just walked out, and you think, gosh, okay, so you've got the guts to invade a sovereign nation, but you can't sit there and, take people being critical of it. I think he's weak. He's a very, very weak leader. Now, last week, this is really interesting. We had Putin's former chief advisor on, Sergei Markov, on the Erin Molan Show. And a couple of days later, he was classified as a foreign agent by the Russian government.
The population of Gaza, 2 millions.
I think the situation in Gaza is a very different situation.
Proportion of the proportional.
By the way,
let me finish. This is very important. I want to say that proportion.
Let me read you what they've said. Someone in Ukraine sent this to me. Now, the headline on this article about this, which includes a statement, says, the Ministry of Justice has included political scientist Sergei Markov in the list of foreign agents. The Ministry of Justice has added political scientist Sergei Markov to the list of foreign agents. This follows from the updated list, etc., blah, blah, blah. Sergei Markov, as indicated on the press release, participated as a respondent on information platforms provided by foreign media and a foreign agent. Now, I'm banned in Russia. I'm not sure whether they're referring to us or to me, but it was 2 days after our interview. Disseminated false information about the decisions of government authorities and their policies, participated in the dissemination of messages and materials from organizations whose activities are considered undesirable in the territory of the Russian Federation. Okay, then they list another couple of people. Yes, so that is fascinating. I'll reach out to him at some stage. I'm not sure if he'll want to hear from me, but yeah, he's now been listed as a foreign agent by the Russian government. So I suspect that may have been our last interview with him. I've done 3 with him so far, 1 on his own and another 2 with Yuri Sak. Have a look at it, have a watch. It gets really heated. Meantime, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has marked his country's Independence Day by promising to continue its fight for freedom. He also says it's calling for peace, but those calls are being ignored. He reiterates, and he's very big on this, Ukraine is not a victim, but a fighter. Now, the former Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, has been kicked off a New York beach. Juicy, huh? When I saw this headline, I thought, this is amazing. What's he done? I mean, I can't really go through the list of things that went through my head because that wouldn't be fair to him because none of them are true. But I was hoping it would be juicier than just Hurricane Erin is on her way. But unfortunately, he was on a beach in New York, relaxing on a chair, and was asked to leave because the conditions got dangerous. But there's photos of him kind of being asked to leave by the authorities. It's so interesting because he's now trying to do in retirement what Joe Biden did during his presidential term. Chill on the beach. Hopefully he gets back there at some stage. Now, the list of schools in California forfeiting a girls' volleyball tournament is growing following controversy over a trans athlete on the Jurupa Valley team. Now, Rim of the World High School and Orange Vista High School, they've both pulled out. Now, the mother of a trans athlete here, her name is Nareda Hernandez, this is the mother's name, put out a statement, I think it was exclusively to the Fox network, in light of all this drama. And it's really interesting. This is what her statement said, and I'll read it to you now. I understand the discomfort some may feel because I was once there too. The difference is I chose to learn, to grow, and to open my heart, she said. Believe me, I know some people genuinely don't understand what it means to be transgender. I'm still learning too, right alongside my child. That is why I choose not to respond with anger or disrespect. Instead, I choose empathy, because learning takes time and compassion makes all the difference. Now, I understand where she's coming from. She's a mother. It's her child. There is no doubt it would be a very difficult position for her to be in. And if it was just asking the world to accept her child as they are, then fine, absolutely. No judgment. Whatever makes you happy, go for gold. Treat them with kindness. Yes, always, whenever you can. Yes, be inclusive, treat people well, be kind, be gentle. But not on women's sports teams. It's really simple. Be whoever you want to be. Identify however you like. That's no one else's business. And people, it doesn't matter. Let them be. But you cannot play on a women's sporting team. A, it is dangerous. The level of physicality is different. It is greater for people born male. Secondly, it's not fair. It's an unfair advantage. These girls train incredibly hard. And all of a sudden they're playing against someone who is probably physically bigger and has more capability. It's just science. This is not being mean. This is not accepting your child or not moving forward with kindness. This is the reality of a sporting environment where things must be fair. So from a safety perspective and a fairness perspective, it's not right. Yes, be kind, accept this child absolutely as they are, always. But they cannot play on a women's sporting team. It is not fair. This is not about people being bigots or being nasty or not opening their hearts and being kind. It's about safety and it's about fairness. That's it. This is my take on the whole thing. Not on my daughter's sporting team and not in her bathroom. That's it. Be who you want to be. Absolutely. You deserve the world. No one should be nasty, but not on my daughter's sporting team and not in her bathroom. That's it. Okay, a typhoon in Vietnam is intensifying with the government preparing to evacuate over 500,000 people. Now, it's called Typhoon Kaki. In Japanese, it means swordfish, they tell me, but I mean, I speak Indonesian, not Japanese. Now, it's heading towards the central district, so we'll keep you up to date with that and give you an update on the situation tomorrow. Okay, let's now get into this chat with Dr. Mike Kelly. Incredibly experienced, so sensible, and gives the most incredible insights into how the world has gone batshit crazy when it comes to the Middle East, Israel, the US, wokeness, the whole entire thing. He is such a powerful voice and so qualified. His voice should carry a lot of weight. It does in the right circles. Have a listen, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. And afterwards, I'll be back with fan mail. Yes, fan mail. Even if you hate me, if you comment, write to me, spend time giving me your perspective, you're a fan. Now enjoy Dr. Mike Kelly. Dr. Mike Kelly, thank you so very much for joining me. It's really lovely to have you on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Erin, and thanks so much for your work in fighting the misinformation warfare battle.
It's insanity. I often think if you'd said to me, I mean, coming up to 2 years ago, Mike, that something would happen like October 7 and that I would come out very publicly in support of the victims and in condemnation of the terrorists. And if you'd said to me, now this will be considered controversial, I would have said, you are dreaming. You know, you are dreaming. What has happened, not just to our country, but to the world?
It's actually part of a broader dynamic that we have been sleeping on. And I've tried to talk about this a lot now at the University of Canberra at this National Security Institute with Peter Lay. We've been focusing on the information warfare challenge that all liberal democracies face right now. And I guess the best way to summarise it is there's a study on democracy that the VDEM Institute at Gothenburg University does. It's been doing it over decades. And the really killer statistic there is that in the last 10 years, we've gone from 48% of the world's population living under autocracies to now being 71%.
Wow.
And there's only 13% of us left living in liberal democracies now. And a really important dynamic of that has been this really coordinated information warfare that the key leaders in that autocratic world of Russia, China, Iran, North Korea have been really coordinating effectively. And I guess they all understood that Russia had had a lot of success with that leading up to 2016. And then since then, they've all been distilling this message about dismantling the unipolar world, as they call it, under the US, and creating a multipolar world, and saying the West is degenerate, it's breaking down, there's racism, there's violence, etc., sending this message out there. And basically they've given up trying to tell people their countries are utopias. The message they now send is that we're better than the West, at least.
At a bare minimum. It's such a, and I had Melanie Phillips on, the former Guardian journalist who then kind of saw the light, if I could put it politely. And she made that point too, but didn't have the statistic that you just gave me to back it up. And it makes so much sense, because what I find hurts the truth so much is that organizations like the UN, in a lot of people's eyes, not ours, because we are engaged in this very much so, and people who live this day to day understand who they are. But if you're just an everyday person who is not digging deep into how it works, you think it's the UN. It's respectable, it's credible. But Erin, the UN is saying it's a famine. Come on. And when you talk about a global body, and 71%, is that the figure, of countries that don't believe in the values we do, have a 71% say, essentially, in what is going on there. No wonder these global organizations have completely lost their way. They're propaganda machines.
Yeah, and it's sad because I devoted a lot of my life into trying to, empower and amplify the UN's capacity to do peacekeeping and the like. And I'm just, absolutely distressed at how far it's deteriorated. And it really has become a clearinghouse for those major autocracies' propaganda, a whitewashing mechanism for them. So, and the statistics about how they just disproportionately focus on one country, Israel, and dismiss all of the massive human rights violations going on in China and Iran and Russia, etc. And, Kevin Rudd's actually surfaced this in his recent PhD on China, where he teases out what the Chinese have been doing in the UN and how every UN agency and organisation has now been completely tainted by all of this. And you see it play out of those ridiculous General Assembly resolutions, which are, myth making and play into this whole information warfare strategy. So the UN now has become dysfunctional, disreputable, and really just a whitewashing mechanism for the worst of the propaganda that we see circulating at the moment.
It's really interesting when I look. So you mentioned this 10-year period of just, countries who wish us harm chipping away in a digital way, in an information warfare battleground, which is, to be honest, the most effective way you can do anything in this day and age. And I look at the people who were marching for Black Lives Matter, the people who were marching for the Me Too movement. They are the same people that are now marching in the pro-Palestinian marches. And they're too stupid to see, most of them. There are some who genuinely care and are just misguided as to where they should put their care, because we should all care deeply about any children that are being hurt. Yep. But explain to me how someone who advocates for a bloke in a workplace to be sacked because he complimented a woman's outfit marches next to someone with a Hamas flag and denies the rape of Israeli and Jewish women. Make that make sense.
It's such a parallel universe. I mean, it's sort of, we're actually seeing the Orwellian nightmare play out here, the inversion of facts and reality. And, you know, you see what Hamas does, and there's plenty of footage out there that shows them staging a lot of these images that we see circulated in our mainstream media. But we never see anybody circulate the interviews with Hamas where they're very open about what their strategy is. You never see the demonstrations in Gaza of Gazans who are then systematically executed and tortured for doing that. You never see the stories of the gay experience in even the West Bank as well as Gaza. You know, there's a young 25-year-old Palestinian named Ahmed Makia whose story really illustrates that. At any given time, there are 2,000 Palestinian gays sheltering in Israel under an asylum seeker program and 2 Israeli NGOs dedicated to nothing but supporting them. And they place them in safe countries like Canada and Australia. And one of these, this Ahmed Makia, was about to be placed in Canada and went back, we believe, maybe to say goodbye to his family in Hebron. And he was seized and beheaded, and it was videoed, etc. So that's how gays are treated in the West Bank and Gaza. And now you see these LGBTQI people demonstrating for these medieval, brutal regimes. You know, it's just so counterintuitive. It's almost laughable, but it's so deadly serious.
I almost feel jealous of people in 10, 20 years who will look back on this and study it and use it as the greatest example of the success of this evil and just go, you know, and people will go, how could they have? Yet now we're having to actually, you shouldn't even have to debate this, should you? You should not have to even launch an argument that is credible against it, because to me it is so obvious what it is, but it's obviously clearly highly successful and very effective in what they do. And a younger generation, an older TikTok algorithms.
Yep. That's the most serious challenge, Erin, and the one that distresses me the most is how our young people's minds are being poisoned through this social media surge. And it is a main focus for this information warfare strategy. And you see it, you mentioned TikTok, I call it TikToxic, really. And so many of our youth are plugged into that. And the manipulative imagery, the manipulative narratives, you know, it has had an effect and continues. And we need to arm our kids to be critical thinkers and to be able to evaluate sources better. It's a really important, you know, key part of the curricula now that we should be instituting nationwide if we want to preserve the health of our democracy.
The thing that frustrates me, Mike, is I'm a deeply empathetic person. I have a million flaws, but you know, the thought of a child anywhere, you know, when my daughter has a blocked nose, I feel sick. You know, I see a headline of something awful happening to a child and I can't even read further because the thought of it breaks my heart. So this whole idea that has been fostered, that somehow if you stand with Israel, or you condemn Hamas, that you are a contributor to baby killing, that you support children. This to me, it's how to bring people who care deeply about others, who are not malicious and evil, because you write them off, you don't need them, they know exactly what they're doing. But the everyday person who sees these images, a lot of which are not real, are not true, with false narratives, but there is suffering in Gaza undeniably. How do we convince people that by standing with Israel, a democracy that is fighting the real enemy of every child born into Gaza, they're born into a death sentence because Hamas, as you said, say on television over and over, they will repeat October 7 over and over. They're not hiding it. And whilst they continue to try and do that, and Israel continues to try and defend itself, these children will be killed. That's on Hamas. How do you convince people that if you care about these kids, can focus everything on eliminating Hamas?
And they take kids from the age of 12 onwards, you know, males, and they have their own version of the Hitler Youth. And their role for women is basically as wombs to generate martyrs and then to indoctrinate those kids. That's the only role they see for women. And it's spelled out in their covenant, of course. But they just see the ultimate objective for these kids is to be a martyr, as cannon fodder. And it helps fuel their information warfare when they can cite those statistics. But this is the thing too, you know, that really, you know, it drives me crazy when I see people talk about famine, etc. I mean, there's been close to 2 million tons of food come into the Gaza Strip. There is enough food that's come in to have fed that whole population for 2.5 years. So why would there be food shortages? Why don't you join the dots here? You know, and the Gaza Humanitarian Fund set up has distributed well over 100 million meals. And now the imagery you see, some of the people who are taking that food are leaving food behind in those boxes because they've got enough and they don't like what they see. So some of those items. So so the reasons that
it's not the behaviour generally you would align with a famine, is it?
No, and any impediments to people getting food have been solely the cause of Hamas, right? And even the UN system is clearly indicating something like 88 to 90% of their stuff's getting looted. And I experienced this in Somalia when we were sent to protect, humanitarian relief there, where the militias were looting the relief materials, selling it across the border in Kenya for buy weapons and committing genocides against other tribes who weren't armed, etc. So we seem to have learnt nothing about this dynamic and the sort of things you've got to do to tackle it. But the worst part about this is how people misuse this so-called international law mantra and laws of armed conflict. And like your dad and I were involved in this sort of situation in Iraq, in the battle for Fallujah. We saw exactly the same approach to the war there. And even more sort of aptly, if you look at the way the ADF engaged in the siege of Mosul between October 2016 to July 2017, similar scale, 1.5 million people were displaced. We ended up having to flatten 40,000 buildings, including 47 mosques and compromised hospitals. And there's probably about 10,000 civilians, no one really knows, who were killed. And that was against only 12,000 ISIS fighters who had none of the 500 kilometres of underground infrastructure that Hamas and Islamic Jihad have, and none of the tens of thousands of rockets, etc. So, when people complain about this urban war, I know the ADF wouldn't have done it any differently, because I know when you see what we had to do in World War II, the 10,000 Australian airmen in Bomber Command, and how in that invasion of Normandy, which was against initially 50,000 Nazi troops, and there's been 50,000 Hamas and Islamic Jihad fighters in Gaza. So it's a World War II scale battle. And the cities of Cherbourg and Khan had to be flattened, in the context of that battle. So I know we wouldn't do anything differently to this. And it's an existential battle for Israel when they fought a war that was being directed at them from 7 different directions, openly dedicated to their entire destruction and annihilation of the Jewish people, among others there. So all I can say is, wake up and look at the reality of this. And if you're calling them war criminals, then you're calling your own ADF and people like me and people like Penny Wong and Richard Marles, who went along with that strategy in cooperation with the government at the time. You're calling all of them war criminals.
That is such a powerful point. And I remember Dad went into Israel with a group of generals as part of an investigation, I think around 2014. And the headline, and the ABC actually published this headline, Mike, which, God, they would have hated every second of it. But it read something along the lines of, "They put us to shame." And this was after he'd been in Iraq, and that was in regards to the way Israel conducted itself and its minimization of civilian casualties. I quote, as someone who was chief of operations for the US allied forces in Iraq, he said, "They put us to shame." So, you're spot on with that stuff. How have you felt as someone who was, a politician in the Labor Party? Were you ashamed? Are you ashamed of what has occurred?
I'm really deeply distressed because it flies completely in the face of the values that the Labor movement are supposed to stand for and our history. And my, forebears who were all served in the army, every single generation, went off to fight fascism in World War II. One of them ended up on the Burma Thai Railway and suffered severely. Looked like a concentration camp survivor when he finally got out. But they knew what they were fighting against, and when they were in the Middle East, they were looked after magnificently by the Jewish community. Tens of thousands of Australians benefited from the welfare system the Jewish community provided to them. And then afterwards, the Labor government, understanding all that, and understanding the power of the narrative there of the Jewish community that had lived there continuously for 4 millennia and were the indigenous people and who'd done so much to merit, and the best birth certificate in history with the League of Nations mandate and the UN vote supporting it. So the Labor Party recognised Israel then. It voted for its membership of the UN. It voted for the partition plan, and all of these things were opposed at the time by the coalition, and so things completely flipped later on. But so this was the Labor Party tradition, and it was all the big lefties of the time, including Communist Party trade union officials who were signing petitions to the government to recognise Israel. And so,
and it's so funny, but it's not funny because it's people's lives, but it's ridiculous.
It is, people don't know history. They don't know the truth. They're so ill-equipped to make judgments on something so complex as the Middle East. And I've spent 40 more years of my life immersed in the Middle East for one reason or another, deployed there many times. And I had the Middle East desk in Strategy Group in Defence. And I've poured through mountains of intelligence reports and, post cables. And to understand the nature of the enemy that we're confronting, and the fact that they're going after all of us at the end of the day. And so Israel is actually fighting our war for us right now and have defended us in so many ways. Like 400 Australian lives were saved through Israeli intelligence provided in 2017 about an attempt to bring down an aircraft leaving Sydney. We've benefited enormously from that and the force protection technology they've provided to our Defence Force, which kept our people alive in Afghanistan, from drones to our protective mobility vehicle technology we're doing in the Hawkeyes now and the IFE project, all of it to protect our people. What have we provided them? Well, we've turned around and spat in their faces in their time of their greatest need. And I think that's so shameful.
I think you've summed that up beautifully. I always think, when I look at, you talk about Israeli society and what the value they place on life, what they've done for Australians in terms of intelligence, but even on a global scale, I compare when I see groups of pro-Palestinians, and I say pro-Palestinians because in a lot of cases they're pro-Hamas, marching. They call for death, destruction, river to the sea, death to the IDF, intifada. Anytime I've ever seen a group of Jewish or Israeli people together since October 7, all they've said is bring them home. They only gather to want their people back, never, ever to call for hurt, pain, death to anyone else. And to me, it's a simple way of looking at it, but based on those two things alone.
Yeah, well, and you highlighted what Jim said about, their adherence and the going above and beyond what's required by the laws of armed conflict.
Well and truly.
Well, Mark Binskin surfaced this too, in the report he did, which journalists...
Oh, they buried that, didn't they? They attempted to, because it did not suit the agenda. That was shameful.
And Penny Wong got up and said, that the report said that Israel had intentionally targeted World Central Kitchen, which was the opposite of what Mark Binskin said in the report. He said precisely the opposite. But he also talked about the fact that the IDF has, very rigorous processes. He surfaced the circumstances in which it happened, where the World Central Kitchen had changed the movement plan without telling the authorities that they had armed guards that they weren't supposed to have. So at night time, with these guys firing in the air, they looked like Hamas fighters, and so it was as much on the poor operational methods and standards of World Central Kitchen as it was on, the IDF slipping up a bit in their targeting procedure, but not intentionally. And he gave the example of an MS hospital that was destroyed accidentally by the US in Afghanistan. And it was a mistake. Mistakes don't equate with war crimes. But Mark teased all this out, and he knows only too well, because he and I worked on targeting processes for the Iraq War in 2003 and all the processes we had to apply there. He knows this inside out. He's not allowed to speak publicly anymore.
I've asked him a couple of times. I got his email and I think he was traveling, but I got the impression that he wasn't saying, but when I get home, so I assumed he probably wasn't able to speak publicly.
Yeah, he's on a retainer waiting on the Israeli military advocate general to produce her final report on the World
Right.
Central Kitchen incident. So once that's done, he'll be able to speak more openly. But I've had a chat with him, recorded an interview about it, those issues around targeting generally, etc. So, but nobody reaches out to him to talk about those things in the mainstream media.
No.
Nobody has reached out to like Professor Tim McCormack, who's probably the world expert on laws of armed conflict.
Because they'll tell the truth, Mike, as you
Yes.
know, and that wouldn't fit or suit.
Yeah, it's shocking, And with the famine, this ridiculous situation is that, I say that in inverted commas because the IPC have changed their entire metric
Headlines. Yeah.
in order to be able to classify this conflict and changed it for this conflict alone.
What does that tell you? If they have to, I mean, but this is obvious. We're saying obvious things. That should tell you there's a problem here.
Exactly. It's all manufactured, manipulated. I saw David Spears flash up an image when he was interviewing Albo on Insiders of that child, terribly suffering from basically a congenital or existing disease, which was causing that child's situation. And then if you looked at other images, it showed his brother well fed,
healthy.
But that's
Did David, just out of interest, make the point that the narrative surrounding this child was false, or no? Was it used as
no? And none of our outlets here have ever corrected that. The New York Times did, but they've never corrected it.
Well, the New York Times did on their ex-publicity account, which wasn't even their main, and that's the insanity. It's like, I mean, I know this firsthand. I was accused of having an affair on the front page of the paper, sued them, won. The retraction was page, 82, this big. And nobody else covered it. And you just, and I know that's a different level of damage done, but this is how the media operate. And for some reason, they're allowed to get away with it.
And it's this frame fixation stuff. You see one image and you extrapolate that to, you can put any statistic on it you like then, and Hamas does. So, they're winning this information warfare battle through a very sophisticated, and I've seen the footage of them staging these things, like the images you see of the kids with the tins and whatnot. You see someone standing in front of them and there are people in Gaza who from a distance. Yes. And there was one little vignette the ABC ran with, and they showed an image of the boy looking down at his mother, and then it cuts away to an image from the mother's perspective looking up at the boy. So it's like, they've staged it completely.
Cinematic. I mean, I don't even do that for my TV show. That's too advanced. I've done an interview, I haven't run it yet, but with the guys from Pallywood/Gazawood who have so much, and he went through so much of this imagery with me and pointed it out. So I'll put that in the show over the next couple of weeks or so. Before I let you go, and I've taken up much too much of your time, and I'm very grateful for it. Mike, I wanted to ask you, when I had General Petraeus on the show, he used the Battle of Fallujah as a kind of guiding point, and he said this is what Israel need to do. And he's been quite critical of how Israel have fought this war, and he said, what we did, they need to go in, clear and secure, whereas Israel has gone in, cleared, not secured. And I kind of made the point to him that it's a different set of, I mean, he knows this, obviously. I wouldn't dare tell him, he's far more experienced than I am, but I made the point that it's a very different situation because you were able to convince civilians and in some way have a relationship where you could, whereas here the civilians are so embedded with Hamas and there is a genuine hate that is, that they're born into of the IDF of Israel. It's a different set of circumstances. I'd love to know how you think Israel should destroy Hamas, finish this war, bring the hostages home, given your immense experience in this space.
Yeah, and I think, Dave, I served with him in Iraq when he was commander of the 101st Airborne, and he did get, the fact that you need to be more sophisticated in your approach to these things when they morph particularly into counterinsurgency from conventional manoeuvre. But Mosul was exactly like this, and we didn't do anything any differently to Israel, as I mentioned, including US heavily involved in that. So it is, the scale of it is World War II conventional battle scale combined now with, flat counterinsurgency terrorism type dimensions. So Hamas transitioned from their manoeuvre units into terrorist cells with pre-positioned weapons and ammunition. storage and stockpiles in the tunnel systems. In Fallujah, there were no tunnel systems. This is like 500 kilometers worth of the stuff. So it's a 360-degree battlefield and multidimensional, so that no one has faced this challenge, in any war. So there is a bit of learning on the run here, as happens.
You also made the point, sorry to interrupt, that it took 8 years to come up with the right strategy, and that's still up for debate in Iraq. So, there's a lot of pressure on Israel to be perfect in a war they did not start, nor want, nor need, that only hurts them.
Yeah, and that clear hole build strategy worked because also you had cooperation from disgruntled Iraqis at the end of the day who were sick and tired of like Al-Qaeda and the like, who were killing tribal leaders. In this situation, anybody who puts their hand up or complains or protests in Gaza, they will be brutally tortured and killed. So it's very hard to enlist the support of the community in this effort that helps clear hole build, but also, they are learning lessons. So the GHF process, this humanitarian fund, where it missed out was it wasn't securing the ingress and egress approaches to the distribution. So Hamas was was able to really get in and disrupt and kill their own people and make it look like, it was failing and denying, food, taking it away from people, etc. Once they left the sites. So, and now they're moving into this idea of moving into Gaza City, which is going to be massively challenging logistically and in terms of troop numbers. And to do clear hole build, you need a lot of troops. Yeah. And Israel was facing a war on multiple fronts where they had to be positioned to deal with Hezbollah potentially, etc. So it was very, very challenging to manage the scale of this. The US, can do that, but for Israel, it's different. I do think the one criticism I've had is that, and I know the IDF likes to work towards a strategic plan, how they craft their operations to support that. And I think the Netanyahu government would have been better advised to form a national unity government that could have come up with a clear narrative about the strategy. And Eyal Zamir, the commander of the IDF, is an amazing soldier, great soldier. He knows what he's doing. So he's keen now to make sure that, they address the humanitarian dimensions of this before they move in. And it's hopefully going to put pressure on Hamas too to finally realise they've got to make the concessions that the Arab League and are calling on that we're not as an Australian government. So the strategy now, one option would be to take this clear hole build to the full extent in Gaza City. Another option might be to say, look, we'll take a deal. If they give us all of our hostages, we'll halt operations. We'll call for an international force. And in the meantime, just resort to special operations, more sort of refined, like sort of rapier-like, rather than sort of broadsword approach to dealing with it and taking down the key players, etc., and unpick the structure that way. But it's easy to say from here. It's a different challenge if you're on the ground, facing the massive scale of it. So, they'll continue. They're an organisation that constantly evaluates the lessons from operations. They've got people dedicated to nothing else. So what they're doing, I know, is the best they can do at the moment. And the world's approach to this should be get behind the IDF, get behind Israel, put all the pressure on Hamas, tell them their propaganda has not worked, lay down their weapons, release the hostages, the war ends right now.
Making way too much sense. It's so simple. Mike, I said last question. This is my last question. I promise it's a quick one. As a former member of the Australian Labor Party, I can't imagine that Donald Trump would have been someone that you would have been particularly fond of, or not necessarily even him, but his politics or his demeanour, his rhetoric. What do you, though, think of the job that he is doing, particularly in this space when it comes to the Middle East? And have your just as an observer, your feelings changed about him?
Yeah, I mean, the one success story that was unquestioned, in the previous Trump administration was the Abraham Accords.
Yeah.
And that's, still in prospect of moving forward beyond that. Israel's talking with Syria at the moment. So, we could see an expansion of that. So that's a success story. So, I mean, some people might say he's like a broken clock that's right twice a day, but so
Some might say, Michael, you would say.
it's a mixed story, but I
Yeah.
would say, look, first class effort in chiming in on dealing with Iran. They are the main problem in the Middle East. Nobody really talks about that. They have orchestrated this galaxy of proxies who are at their beck and call, who they directed in this war. They're guilty of the major war crime of starting a war of aggression here. And nobody talks about taking them to the international court or whatever, but they've been undermining all the other countries in the Middle East at the same time as fighting this relentless war against Israel and seeking nuclear weapons to complete its entire destruction. So their intervention to use the ordnance that was required to deliver the heavier blows was great. That was a huge game changer. Salute that completely. I don't know if we'd have seen that by any other US administration bold enough to step forward on that, with the IDF paving the way to make sure they weren't going to suffer any casualties. But
They played a role too. Trump had to be reminded of that at times.
But a good call. So you've got to agree and support actions that are taken that are the correct ones. So, and I do.
Dr. Mike Kelly, thank you so, so much. Thank you for your service. In my mind, and given who my dad was, there's nothing that I value or appreciate more in someone than the willingness to give their life for one's nation. And you did that for many years, and you are still serving in the most incredible way. How can people, so thank you, genuinely, how can people follow you and your work?
Oh, well, we have a podcast that we're running now, which is, if you really want to do the deep dive, historical and legal and military backgrounds to all of these sort of stories at the moment, war in Ukraine, China, we're aiming to tease all of that out. We have great, really highly valuable expertise plugging into that. So look for that on YouTube. It's called Frontlines and Fault Lines. We
Front lines and fault lines. We'll put down a link down here so people can go straight to it as well.
Yep. And that's, it's not as accessible for the way you do things, which is great.
Are you saying that I'm more of a surface coverer of these issues?
No, you do a great job of really explaining.
Look, I'm definitely doing it for a broader audience and trying to help people understand who are not you. So absolutely.
Oh, well, that's so important. Yeah, so important. We've got to be fighting this battle on multiple fronts, but you've done a great job of actually making it understandable for people.
Bless you.
So that's what we're, and look, also let me say about Jim, like I was with him for that year in Iraq. I've known him so well. I was captain in his 6RAR rugby team when we won the premiership. Known him for a long time.
He was more an AFL guy, he used to tell us.
But we had a lot of dealings on Israel and issues over the years, and I was privileged to help him with his book, and he was gracious enough to acknowledge that, so, you should be proud of him, and I know he would be proud of you in doing what you're doing at the moment. So, and we do all miss him.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I still can't not hear about Dad and not get upset, but that means the world. I hate this saying, and I'm not sure what culture, I should look it up, but it says people die twice, once when they take their final breath and the second time when people stop saying their names. So my favorite thing is to talk about my dad and have other people talk about him. So thank you for ending this on a beautiful note. Dr. Mike Kelly, thank you so much.
No worries, Erin. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, make sure you definitely follow Dr. Mike Kelly and all his wonderful work. Okay, finally today on the show, it's time for fan mail. Now, off the back of my take on Francesca Albanese's attempts to convince us that Hamas are just politicians, they built schools, they built roads. Merce Life on YouTube says, ideology makes people go blind to certain reality and facts. It explains why seemingly intelligent people are enabled to present lies as if it was truth, even appearing to be convinced of what they are saying. This is truly deplorable. Yeah, I often wonder with her if she is actually aware of the level of evil that emits out of her. or if she genuinely feels like she is in the right. I'd almost be more comforted by thinking or knowing that she was very aware that she is malicious and evil and is selling propaganda. Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't, who knows? Okay, still off the back of that, Anita says, I did not understand when Trump wanted to dismantle the UN, but time has proven him right. Dismantle the UN, WHO, and the EU, and the world will be a better place. Absolutely. These organisations do far more damage than good, excessive damage. And because so much of the world sees them as legitimate and credible and being for humanity, they have weight, and that can change the way people feel about things. People who are not like you or I, who are not really engaged in these kind of issues, look at the UN and, as I said, think, oh, that's reputable. So they should be absolutely dismantled. They are a waste of space. Okay, another one on Francesca. I'm really starting to believe this woman, Francesca Albanese, is under the control of some kind of nefarious demonic mind control. This sort of insane public administration is not normal. You can say that again. Now, off the back of the interview I did with the former hostage, Shlomi, who was just incredible. Lloyd says, thank you, Erin, for giving Shlomi the opportunity to tell his story through your channel. Thank you so much, Shlomi, for your courage and your willingness to share your story. The world needs to hear this, but sadly the mainstream media won't show it. I only wish our Aussie PM and Foreign Minister would watch this, but sadly, I'm sure they won't. Well, our Foreign Minister wouldn't even go to the site of October 7 when she went to Israel, so I assume she's certainly not going to watch his account. I love this. It is strange to see, and this is Blue Moon. This is Blue Moon on YouTube, that someone who went through what he experienced, talking about Shlomi, is more full of life than all the elitist privilege that lives safely in the USA universities, that he spreads more positivity and hope than all of them combined. Such a great point. Given what he's gone through, you would understand if he were bitter. If he was full of hate, I would get it. He's not. He's the complete opposite. Is such a good point. I also got lots of requests for feet content. For some reason, my feet are considered very sultry and attractive. There's a wiki feet page of me where, I mean, not that I've looked or that I care, but the rating is like very high, 4.9 or something out of 5. There are thousands of photos where people have taken shots of me from television at different events, from Instagram, and zoomed in on my feet. Hi, Erin, would you sell feet content? No. Not yet. I mean, never say never. I mean, if you couldn't identify them as my feet, it could be something I look into. I've also got, here I am in Sydney. Would you date me? What is your situation? I get a lot of these questions from people regarding my personal life. Now, I am a very private person when it comes to my personal life. Even my daughter's father, I never posted about him publicly. We didn't go to events. I keep that side very private, but I am very single, very happily single, very peacefully single. For the first time in my adult life, I am on my own and the happiest I've ever been. So it would take, and I'm trying to think, not Brad Pitt, because I don't think he's quite probably at the top of his game at the moment. I'm trying to think of someone. It would take, like, even a god could not convince me right now to give up this existence. My focus is entirely on my daughter and on my work. And I've never been happier. Take from that what you will. And this is not a challenge. I mean, you know, if you'd like to try. No, very happily single and living my best life, which is a lovely change. Thank you so much for asking. And finally, I knew it would only take a matter of time for the people at the big mainstream media networks to notice me. You know, the likes of Fox News, who really are now starting to talk about me in ways that are, well, I mean, you make up your mind.
So did Erin deliver the punch that we thought she was going to?
And the answer is yes. The answer is always yes. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Bye.